Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Before we begin, please note that this session is being recorded. However, as a participant, you will not be visible or audible during the webinar. All attendees are muted by default. If you have any questions throughout the session, feel free to submit them via the chat or the Q&A section. We will collect them and address them at the end of the presentation and at the end of today's webinar. Today, we will explore how to boost profits with spare parts pricing excellence and provide valuable insights into the strategic approaches of value-based pricing and market-based pricing. And for that, meet our speakers. We are happy to have two experts with us today. First, Danilo Zatta. He is partner and head of sales, pricing, and top-line strategies at Valcon, and one of the world's leading advisors and thought leaders in the field of pricing and top-line excellence. And then also happy to welcome Andres Mikulis. Andres is head of Nordics and Italy at MARKT-PILOT. He has spent over 12 years collaborating with the leading OEMs across Europe, specializing in the aftermarket and spare parts business. And what's on our agenda today? We will take a deep dive into the challenges of declining sales and explore strategic responses to tackle them effectively. We'll discuss how leveraging market data can help drive a smarter market-based pricing approach. And additionally, we'll look at a real-world example of successful pricing strategies in action. And finally, shift our focus to long-term revenue growth, going beyond quick fixes to build a sustainable and profitable future. We are looking forward to an engaging discussion. Now, let's get started. And I can only say, Danilo, over to you.
Thank you very much, Alena, and cool to be here in this great opportunity to share insights into spare parts pricing. So let's jump into the next slide and let's discuss how to set spare parts prices. Well, there are multiple ways we can do this. You can see here that there are different pricing maturity levels of companies doing this. Everybody started with some form of cost plus pricing. How does it work? You define a cost basis, then you add a target margin, and then you have the price. The great advantage of this is that it's easy to do and something that most companies started with. The disadvantage is, however, that this is only reflecting our internal point of view. Maybe customers perceive a higher value that with this internal perspective, we are not capturing. Another approach is competitor pricing. What are we doing in this case? Well, in this case, if we are, for example, a follower, we look into competitors' pricing. If they have an index of 100, we go at an index of 80 because we are a follower, and then we have our parts pricing. The issue with this is that first, often the transactional prices are not known. The spare parts prices are not so transparent. And if we are a leader, then of course we shall be setting prices first, or if we have some innovative parts, then of course, and we are a follower, we should be setting prices. So also this is not ideal. This is why we are preaching value-based pricing, which on one hand requires more intelligence because you have to understand the value of what you are selling. But on the other hand, you are then capable of extracting maximum willingness to pay. If you do this with this exercise, passing from a low maturity to a higher maturity, the great thing is that on average, your return on sales will increase by 2 to 8%. So if you have a revenues of 100 today, after having optimized spare parts pricing, it's 102 to 108, where this 2 to 8 is not only additional revenues, it's also additional profits. Let's move ahead and let's see what is happening. Well, when we start speaking about value, then the typical reaction is value. Well, we live in a commoditized world. The decade of value is over. So how can we price? Well, in this case, what then is done is to make sure that we challenge this view. And how can we challenge this? We can challenge it by quoting one of the most classical commodities, namely water. So even for water, we can prove that there is always value we can attach to. If we buy water from the tap at home, we will pay to 1 cent and we have it immediately available. It's fresh, it's good, it tastes very nicely. So 1 cent is really a low price. If we have a shower in the hotel, we will not pay by the liter. It's just so cheap that we can take the shower. However, as soon as the water is bottled, then it will have a factor of 200. It will be 200 times more expensive. If then it has bubbles, it has a brand like Perrier, it's bottled in glass and not plastic, then the factor is 600 times more expensive. I have 3 kids. Natalie is 20 and studying economics. We have Sebastian who turned 18 and make a big party at home, destroying my house. And then we have Marilena, she's 16. When I went into her room, I saw her spraying something in her face. And then I was asking, what are you doing? And then I discovered she was spraying water in her face. So you can find this beautiful Evian Brumisator product, which is, however, 1,300,000 times more expensive than what we saw before. And by the way, if you read Evian from the other way around, you will see that you can read it as naive. However, it goes even further. If you have design bottles of Ferrarelle, you pay 4,800 times the price. I was some time ago at a restaurant with some colleagues in Milan called Krakow. I took the order and then Krakow himself, this 5-star Michelin cook, came out of the kitchen and said, "You didn't order the water. Do you want to have some Ferrarelle Gucci?" I said, "Of course, bring us the water." And then we got the bill, 25 euros for a bottle of water. But this is not enough. This is the most expensive bottle of water you can find. 4 million euros with 6,000 diamonds, called Tributo Modigliani Acqua di Cristallo, with water from Fiji, from France, from Iceland. So please don't tell me that we are in front of a commodity and we cannot extract value. The same applies for metallic painting. The cost of this is around 100. However, when you want to buy it at your dealer because you want to have this beautiful metallic painting, then you pay 1,800. So clearly also a very nice case on how to monetize willingness to pay and value. Or look at this. Here we have a beautiful Porsche 911. And if you are a fan of such a great car, then there is one thing you cannot miss. And this is this yellow thing over here that, by the way, is produced by a company like Brembo in the northern part of Italy. And guess what the production cost of this is? If you produce this and you want to understand what the price is, then you would have a production cost of around 900 euros. So let's take 1,000 for the sake of simplicity. And then if you say, well, I want to have 30% margin, then your price will be 1,300. But guess what is the price a Porsche of this car, of this component? It's 8,000. And the same product at Ferrari, maybe it's not yellow, maybe it's red, maybe it's black, but the same product will cost you 15,000. So if you applied a cost plus logic in this case, and you were happy with a 1,300, then you would have missed out a huge amount of money. This is why we shall make sure to focus on understanding value when we do our parts pricing. And there is also a warning, because cost plus leads to inconsistencies that often are difficult to explain to customers. Let's look at this example. We are an automotive producer, and you have the right and the left rear view mirror. However, the prices are different. This was the case that I found when I was working for one very well-known automotive OEM. And this was the reaction of customers. They were asking, why does the rear mirror cost less than the left one? Well, the explanation was because of cost plus. One breaks more often, so we have a higher production. The cost goes down. With it, the margin applied to the cost basis, and prices are lower. However, this is difficult to explain to customers. Or take this other example. You have a cabin producers for tractors. They produce small cabins for small vineyards tractors and the larger ones where the cabins are much larger. However, they look the same. They are just different in size. And the bigger one, which intuitively shall cost more, is costing less. Again, we see confused customers. Here you see the reaction of a customer asking, how is it possible that the larger one is costing less than the smaller one? The answer is, again, cost plus, because costs are lower, volumes are higher, so prices are lower. In this case, the best thing is to align prices of the mirrors so that they make sense and are consistent, and more than proportionally increase the price of the larger cabin. What happened when this was done? Everybody was very happy. Dealers were happy, customers were happy, because this made sense. So you were earning more, your price image was much more consistent, and you had no issues in explaining this to customers. This is why we shall take pen and pencil this evening before going to bed and write 100 times, price is not based on cost. This also applies to the spare parts pricing world. So the first lesson is that pricing based on cost are usually not ideal. We are risking to leave money on the table. If you lower our cost, we pass automatically the cost advantage to clients. And if we deliver superior value, we are not able to capturing this. This is why we shall make sure that we are focusing on value and also transform spare parts pricing, generating quick wins. And this is the beauty of spare parts pricing. There are a lot of possibilities to immediately improve profitability. Here, a first example. This is a classical lever you can apply to boost profitability. Namely, understanding what is the actual price, for example, within the parts family, and what is the predicted price based, for example, on the size, on the weight, on technical features, on competitive prices. And then if you discover, like in the case of product C, that the actual price is much lower than the price it should have, then you can increase prices. You will not hurt your price image. You will not lose volumes. You will simply start earning more from tomorrow when you have the new price applied. One more nice quick win is related to hierarchical pricing. How does this work? Well, you see here 3 different products. In this case, it's trucks, it can be cars, it can be machines that are of the same producer but are priced differently. And here we will find that the customer buying the most expensive truck will also have a higher willingness to pay when it comes to spare parts. So if we have a set of brake pads, let's not price them all the same, but let's make sure that we align them with the prices of the products. The disadvantage of this is that you are creating a bit of complexity because you have suddenly not 1 but 3 SKUs, so more articles, more complexity. But the benefits are there because you will be able to monetize this higher willingness to pay. By the way, we did this also within companies having different brands. Let's just take as an example the VW Group. You would have a Skoda brand, a VW Group, and an Audi brand. And here, if you compare the Skoda Fabia with the VW Golf and the same model also at Audi, you will see that you can have the same brake disc. But if you price it differently, you will find that the VW Golf driver will have a higher willingness to pay, and the Audi also an even higher willingness to pay. So why not capturing this? Another quick win that I love is related to price rounding. I always use the example of a chewing gum. If we have a chewing gum which has a price of 90 cents and we find a price threshold of €1, then if we go over the €1, demand will decrease. But if we are increasing, for example, from 90 cents to 99 cents, we will not lose volume, we will not hurt our price image, but we will just have 9 cents more revenues, which at the same time are also 9 cents more profits because the cost basis did not change. And by applying this to spare parts pricing, by understanding which price threshold we have, we can immediately monetize differences that are available to us. And this will boost our profitability and help also further transforming pricing. One last example of quick wins is then related to parts segmentation. Here we can differentiate between short tail pricing, which is focusing on the parts that are more visible and that are taken by customers or dealers as the ones that indicate our overall price positioning, here we want to be very careful of not exceeding in pricing. And then we have the long tail. These are the many SKUs that nobody really knows or cares about. Here we can also quadruple prices. Nothing will change. However, we want to also make sure that total cost of ownership still makes sense. So by looking into the different parts of the short and long tail, we can play with prices and make sure we monetize better and more. So we can finance a pricing transformation with quick wins. We just saw a small selection. There are much more. And this is the beauty of spare parts pricing that helps us making sure that we can increase profitability of a company. Indeed, a rule based a rule that we can look at is the one saying that around 20% of the revenues are coming from after sales. However, 50% of the profits come usually from this area. So having a good understanding on where we are versus competition is a starting point, because this is also helping us very well to maximize profitability, optimizing prices. So this was a quick look into quick wins and introduction on parts pricing. Let me now hand over to Andres.
Thanks a lot, Danilo. Yeah, maybe just a recap on a few of the findings that Danilo just shared with us, and also the shortcomings that come with the cost-plus approach. I'd like to share some insights on how taking the market perspective into consideration can help overcome some of these challenges, both with regards to generating these quick wins that Danilo just mentioned, but also long-term benefits. So how, as an OEM, do I capture and protect market share that I should be having as an OEM without leaving money on the table? So if we look at this typical pricing process for a spare part, on this picture we see a servo drive. This is an item that typically has some sort of landed cost. You mark it up according to margin targets, perhaps even category or region-specific factors to define your sales price. But what happens is that simple aspects of demand and supply are not really taken into consideration, and the sales price ends up being detached from the market level. And this is something that makes the sales price very inaccurate and also difficult to explain to your end customers, and therefore results in lost sales. Because either you're leaving money on the table or margin on the table, or you're priced too high and end up losing market share and jeopardizing your company's price image overall. So for these type of comparable parts, such as this drive, this is really where market data comes into play and helps you set your prices with confidence. The market data is something that we can provide with an AI-based technology on an SKU level, and having that type of market data gives you an extremely high level of accuracy for pricing your parts according to your specific strategy and also channel structure. So it not only helps you to optimize margins and profits, but also defend your prices with confidence and having the discussions with customers and channel partners in a very informed and data-based ways, especially in situations when you're being challenged on these prices. If we're now taking a real-life example, I have the following situation. So it's a manufacturer of material handling equipment, highly overpriced compared to the market on spare parts, and rather poor insights on both selling prices for these items that are available in the market, but also purchasing costs. And that's, of course, a problem, because this typically results in customers, not only customers, also dealers pushing back on prices while sales continue to decline. And at a customer, as an OEM, I'm still challenged with the situation that on the one hand, I need to take these pushbacks and concerns serious, but at the same time, I have rather strict P&L requirements that I need to adhere to and margins that I need to protect. So what should I do? I mean, this is something really where market data comes into place to identify these areas where I might have to lower prices, and not just the areas, but also to what extent a price decrease might be warranted. A side effect of that is that it also helps me to secure better purchase prices by identifying price points that are available in the market, and also vendors that are offering these items. And of course, this shouldn't be a race to the bottom. So I want to counterbalance that effect to some extent. It also helps me to capture and keep value parts for items where I might suspect competition, but where there is not any competition around or very limited competition, or in the best of worlds, items that are priced below the market price. Now, taking an example, so the filter element from this particular OEM, we see, as we mentioned before, this is an item highly overpriced compared to the market. Not only is it overpriced, we see a rather large number of vendors that are offering exactly the same item. And we also see that the purchasing cost is already part of the problem, because some of these competitor price points below the costs that I am purchasing this item for. And now applying a simple markup logic here ends to this price being completely detached from the market reality. And yeah, unfortunately, the truth is that as an OEM, there is only so much value add that I can provide on a commoditized item, at least. So of course, there are aspects like availability, service, warranties that need to be taken into consideration that may justify a certain premium. And in the end of the day, from an end customer's perspective, of course, it feels great to buy directly from the OEM, but there's a limit. So in some cases, such as this one, the price simply needs to be lowered to stop negatively affecting the price image and losing market share. Because in the worst case, end customers not only buy this part somewhere else, but also start questioning total cost of ownerships and are drawn to other OEMs. So if we now bring this back to a few aspects that Danilo mentioned earlier as well. So market intelligence is one part of the equation. It's a very powerful one, but even stronger when combined with a company perspective, including product and customer knowledge. So in this case, we've seen this filter element that sits 80% above market price. We've also seen a large number of competitors with competitive lead times, and we know that this item is highly commoditized. So if I now complement this with additional data sources, we see that win rates are low and sales volumes have been falling. And if I now start putting these pieces together, this gives us a rather clear picture on the situation and helps us define our call to action. And not only the call to action, but also to move strategically, basically setting goals for these type of items. Most likely, we would try to boost volume and improve our market share again. If I'm lowering prices, perhaps also coming with a question, what is an effective way of communicating this to my end customers and the specific segments? So of course, we want to make our end customers aware of that to boost volumes again. Also for these type of items, what is a reasonable market position? Do I want to be very competitive on this item, perhaps even undercut market prices? Or can I say I am the OEM, a certain premium is warranted, perhaps 10%, perhaps less, really depending on the industry that you're in. And in the end of the day, I, of course, also want to measure success coming from any price changes that I might be taking. So going ahead, same OEM, but looking at this, the other side of the medal, also a seemingly commoditized item, in this case an accumulator, and we also see that a similar markup logic has been applied than on the item before. So we have a purchase cost of around about 100 euros and a sales price somewhere in the area of 300 euros. So perhaps slightly higher markup, but in the end of the day, the logic quite similar. But what we see right now, compared to the previous illustration, that there's no other vendor in this particular region selling this item to this OEM's end customers. Or at least it becomes much more difficult for your end customer to get this item somewhere else. Therefore, does it really make sense to apply a similar markup factor? Because this is an item that technically gives you much more flexibility in setting your price, simply because there is very limited or even no competition, and it helps us balance the approach. It means that for some items, I might have to lower the price, while on some items I can increase the price based on this this market data and leveraging the pricing power that I have for some of these items and categories. Again, similar illustration as before. So the market data is telling us we don't have any direct competitors for this item. That's great. We also know this seems to be a typical catalog item, so fairly commoditized. But from sales and based on demand figures, we see that we typically sell that items when we have it on stock. So the win rates are good. What should I then do as an OEM? So of course, I want to optimize for availability. Perhaps I also want to highlight the superior quality or value of this particular item and leverage the exclusiveness status to the best possible extent, and also involve my channel partners wherever I can. We're now putting this all together. So looking at a typical spare parts portfolio or a portfolio of purchased parts, commercial items, if you will, an item can technically fall into 4 different categories. So we have items that are underpriced relative to the market, items that are exclusive, meaning no competitors or other vendors around in the particular region selling these type of items. And we have overpriced items, meaning, as in the example before, we have a sales price that is well or to some extent above the market price. And of course, all of these different categories require different approaches. So underpriced items are typically items that I can touch rather quickly. So quick wins, if you will, increasing prices with confidence based on market data. Exclusive items is something where I might want to validate that exclusiveness a little bit further. Is there really no one else around, or how difficult is it for my end customer to obtain these items somewhere else? So maybe I need to be a little bit more modest with price increases. And then these overpriced items, as in the example before. So really assess any price reductions to boost volume and increase market share. And typical approach here is to focus on items that are perhaps not just a little bit, but even significantly priced above market, but with limited revenue at risk to really see the effects on market share and volume, and then start slowly testing this for items with more revenue behind it. Because in the end of the day, I want to make sure that as many items as possible of these comparable ones are in line with the market, and with the market or in line with the market, exactly as we said before. This is how you define it as an OEM, to what extent your industry or your business model justifies a certain premium and how that premium can look like. So at market might even mean 15% above market price, perhaps also 10% below market price, really depending on your strategy and business model, how you want to define it. Now, 5 takeaways of what Danilo and I just spoke about. So going back to the pricing transformation, we saw that there is really a large number of quick wins out there that we can leverage simply by working very actively with our spare parts portfolio, and that can be a great booster for financing a larger scale pricing transformation. Of course, having a good understanding of where you are versus the competition is a great starting point. And also, as we pointed out, different categories require different pricing approaches for different types of factors, for different types of segments, depending on what type of part category it is, and perhaps also factoring in local market conditions. And depending on your distribution model, like in the example before, material handling, typically heavily reliant on distributors and dealers. So involving channel partners is key to make this successful. And last but not least, pricing does not end with a price list, but really requires continuous analysis of price enforcements, hit rates, and so on, and make this an ongoing exercise.
So, thank you very much, Danilo and Andres, for these insights and very informative presentation. I would say let's move on to our Q&A session. So, to all our participants today, if you haven't submitted your question yet, feel free to do so, either in the chat or the Q&A section. And we'll take the next few minutes to go through them and answer your individual questions. For now, maybe, okay, see someone typing. All right. Then first question, how quickly can you realize parts pricing quick wins? Who would like to take over?
I can jump on this. Well, the beauty of spare parts pricing is that if you change something, if you apply one of the quick wins we saw together, then already from tomorrow you can change parts pricing. There are some changes where you maybe you need to stick to some deadlines, and maybe you can do it only in certain parts of the period where you are looking at. However, usually when you are, for example, introducing a new rounding routine and you round your prices differently, and you propose them with an updated price list from tomorrow, already from tomorrow you start realizing and enjoy the higher profits. So the beauty of it is that it's not only very strong in terms of profit uplift, it's also very quick.
Right, thank you very much. Then let's go on with the next question. Is there any right combination of both strategies, value-based and cost-plus strategy?
Also a great question. I can jump on it, and Andres, feel free to add. So usually you still keep cost plus pricing to understand what is the minimum margin you want to apply and what is the lower level. So this gives you an indication. And you, of course, you also want to do competitive pricing because you are not alone unless you have a super innovative products. But usually you need to understand also where are you positioned vis-a-vis competition. So usually it's a mix. You're having a cost information, you look into where competition is, and then you have a number of drivers that indicate what the value of these spare parts is, so that by combining this, you have then a great outcome in terms of optimizing prices. Andres, if you want to add anything, feel free to jump in.
Absolutely, I can only second that. So typically it requires a balanced approach to be successful, especially value-based pricing, extremely relevant where applicable, whether this is on captive parts or items that have logically explainable value drivers. And of course, these items are very attractive from a margin perspective. But then including market-based pricing for commercial parts is also extremely relevant, not only from a revenue and market share perspective, but we also know that the independent aftermarket as such is growing rapidly. So there's lots of players going after the OEM's business, and the market is becoming more and more transparent and comparable. And those are, in the end of the day, these commercial items, parts that have a significant impact on the customers' price image or price perception, simply because these are comparable.
Right. Then maybe the next question fits into this topic. How do you tackle the common argument that spare parts are expensive compared to the similar or identical ones purchased outside the official channel, for example, local vendors? Thinking, for example, of Brembo brake pads.
This is a super question, very relevant. This is why we often introduce what we call life cycle pricing. So usually we want to reduce the parts prices when a product is in guarantee. Why this? Because your dealers usually apply a percentage amount on the prices that they take at their compensation. So we want to make sure that we protect margins, but we reduce prices. Then when we are outside of the warranty period, we can increase prices. When we have then a decennial, let's say, part, which applies, for example, to a vehicle or a machine which has more than 10 years of life, then usually we reduce them to avoid that customers are going to parts that are not genuine parts. And then just to take the example of cars, when we have then a car that becomes a historic car, then of course having a genuine part increases the value, and then we increase prices again. So by following a bit over the life cycle, the willingness to pay, you can find an answer to this element here. I see Andres nodding. Maybe you want to add something.
Not much to add, I think, at least nothing that will make the answer any better. I'm in full agreement here.
All right, then we have another question. So according to your experience, what are the 3 to 4 main part segments in B2B in B2B markets? For instance, consumables items.
Can you repeat that question, please? Sorry.
So according to your experience, what are the 3 to 4 main part segments in B2B markets?
Main
so maybe
part
also
segments
to tackle.
Well, I can start providing an answer. You can start by dividing the world in two. There are the captive parts and the non-captive parts. The non-captive would be the competitive parts, where you are exposed, for example, to the price logics of your suppliers, so the original equipment manufacturers. In this case, if you are having a strong brand, you usually can command the premium, especially if the brand is labeled with your logo. And then you have the other part of the world, which is the captive. Here you are only offering this part. So in theory, like with engines, you could increase the prices very strongly because you are the only one offering it. But at the end of the cycle of the machine or of the car, you want to make sure that the machine is bought again, so you will need to consider also total cost of ownership. This just to start. Andres, if you want to deep dive further, please.
Perhaps just one thing to add is that I would argue that also very much depends on the industry that you are in, how the split looks like, both between captive and commercial items. And within each of these areas, we have different subcategories that can carry more weight. Some manufacturers are very heavy on electrical components, while others have a stronger focus on mechanical components or so. So I would really say this depends on the type of equipment that you're selling.
Right. Thank you for your answer. Hope this works well for the one who put the question into the chat. So regarding the time, we have 2 more questions for today. So the first one is, if prices are correct and aligned with the market, but customers are still complaining about high prices, how can we act?
Well, I can give it a go. If they are aligned with the market and customers are complaining, you can, of course, show the prices of competitors and explain that you are aligned. Another thing that you could do is to think of kits. Do you want to offer a spare part kit or a bundle or something that is not showing the price of a single spare part, but a combination of spare parts? There could be a winter kit or another kits that you're offering, and then you will be not so transparent, not so comparable with the prices of spare parts.
Any addition there?
Adding to that, I would also argue that the number of price complaints will automatically go down by aligning your prices with the market level, because market-based pricing as such is an approach that is perceived rather as fair and genuine by end customers, especially when it's explainable. And when you can have that discussion in a data-based way, it's very difficult for your end customer to argue against that, because typically they would always complain when you're too expensive. But the other way around, they would rarely make you aware if you are charging too little and the market around you is more expensive. So what we see is that these type of dialogues typically tend to disappear or go down significantly once sales prices are being aligned with market levels.
All right, then the last question for today. What are the key KPIs you should track to ensure, analyze, or audit if you have an effective spare parts pricing strategy?
I can give a go, and then Andres, please chime in. So one is to have a KPI that reflects the index of how many machines you are selling and how much percentage of spare parts you are selling. This will show you that by increasing the number of machines you are selling, you're also increasing the spare parts linked to it. If this should not be the case, then it indicates to you that you're losing out because maybe your prices are not in line with the market and the customers are buying the non-genuine parts. So this would be an alarm bell that shows you that something is not working and you're missing out opportunities. Andres, back to you.
I would also add win rates. Also, if we think back of the pie charts that we looked at, market perspective is of course one thing, but even stronger when combined with internal intelligence. Danilo, you mentioned the install base. Absolutely. On that note, I would also include win rates, because if you have high win rates, in most of the cases, there is little indication why prices should be lowered, because you might even be overpriced for some of these items. But if the demand is stable and your win rates are high, this is something that helps you derive the right course of action.
All right. So I think we've answered all the questions. So that brings us to the end of today's webinar. A big thanks to you, to our speakers, for sharing their knowledge, and to all of you joining us. We hope that you found the session insightful and valuable. And if you have any further questions, or if you would like to revisit the content, the recording will be available shortly. And with that, thank you again for being here today, and have a great day, and see you hopefully next time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.